Live?
Yes.
Awesome.
Do it.
Hi, you guys. I'm Suzanne from the Chalkboard mag. It looks like we just started. Hi, everybody. I'm trying to get the opening here right for everybody. Hi, I'm Suzanne from the Chalkboard mag. We are just starting up our webinar, but I've been getting warmed up with these guys for a few minutes. So fun to nerd out on wellness with a couple of our favorite pros. We're talking with Dr. Frank Lipman from Be Well. We're going to talk to him about just as much as we can in the next 45 minutes about his wellness expertise. He's really been in the field for a long time, so super excited to be chatting with him today. And we also have Gunnar Lovelace from Thrive Market, one of our neighbors here in LA, and a super exciting business leader who's kind of changing the way we're eating some of our favorite wellness foods. We're going to get into it with both of them. Can everyone see all of us at the same time?
I'm not sure, but it's great to be here.
It's so great to have you both. So we talked about the theme of this webinar being talking about getting into your pantries and your kitchens and some of your favorite staples. But let's start diving in. I think there are so many exciting things we can talk about today. Before we do that, I just want to touch also on our giveaway. So just a reminder to everyone who's watching, we've got a $500 gift card to Be Well, a 5-year membership to Thrive Market, also a $50 gift card, and a $200 gift card to Press Juicery. So super exciting. I think all the details are on the landing page there. And if you've signed up for the webinar, I think you're involved. So we'll get the details out to you guys after the webinar is over, but very exciting. Hi, you guys. I think even though I've already been picking your brains for a little bit, we should just hop in and talk kind of power round about some of your favorite like staples. We've been talking a little bit about some of those kind of essential things you always have on hand. I wonder if you guys want to start there, both talking about, things that are always in your pantry, things that are always in your grocery cart. What do people do in real life?
Real life. What is real life?
Yeah, what is real life?
You want to take it away first, Frank?
You take it away. You take it.
Oh, that's very, very generous of you. I mean, I'm like a total creature of habit. So, I have a few things that I just use all the time. It's like coconut oil, obvious. We have these great collagen bars from Mark Suzanne that we sell that are just fantastic. They're only 3 grams of sugar from Primal Kitchen, and they're just awesome. So I have them in my car, my briefcase, I have them everywhere. I love pumpkin seeds. So we have these great sprouted pumpkin seeds, also just fabulous, low sugar, great fats. Those are a few things.
What do you do with pumpkin seeds? Is that something you use for like a smoothie crunchy?
I just eat them. If I'm kind of hungry and I'm like, I got a little bit of a sugar thing and I want something sweet, and I just will take some of that, just a handful of them. It totally knocks the sugar craving back. And it's a great fat and protein.
Love it.
Right, well, so I'm sort of similar. I'm obsessed with eating a lot of fat and low in sugar. So staples are organic. The unrefined coconut oil, almond butter. I'm a big smoothie fan. So actually, my wife came up with this great recipe with chocolate whey from grass-fed cows with coffee and almond butter and avocado and coconut oil and some chia seeds. So,
yes, you're speaking my language.
I love fat. The more fat I can eat, the better.
Yeah.
And less sugar. So especially as you get older and your sugar metabolism is not as good. I think most people do better eating more fat and less sugar. So a lot of the staples I have tend to be on the fat side and making food easy and simple to eat. So, I always got raw cacao around. My
What about the maca? You know, we were just talking about the sexy maca. Come on, tell us about your maca habit.
Sometimes I'm a big adaptogen fan, so I take my adaptogen formulas, but I know my wife puts her maca in her smoothie. She probably throws it in mine. I don't even know.
Non-psychoactive adaptogens, though. Non-psychoactive.
That's why you've been happily married for so long. These smoothies are the secret.
I think they are.
Well, Dr. Frank, I feel like you should share that recipe with us because that sounds right up our alley. That's the kind of thing we're making here in the office all the time as well.
I sure will. Yeah, I wrote a blog on it. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I love too that you guys both started out talking about fats right away. We've been talking a lot about that, and it's a big trend. I think I wonder if people out there really have latched onto the idea of this, you know, more fat-enriched diet, or if it's something that's still really confusing to people. Do you guys want to kind of touch on that?
I think it's such an important topic. I mean, you look at the growth of this mantra that comes from conventional food companies in the 80s on these low-fat, complex carb diets, and the way that conditioning maps to the growth of diabetes and obesity. There's such a corollary to it, and I think it's one of the great mistakes that we've made in our food system over the last 30 years. And I still think, you know, there's a group of us that are talking about healthy fats, and we're out there, all of us here and so many others that we know that are friends, we're like beating the drum, like eat fats, but it's still so early on. You know, I talk to friends of mine that are in this community and exposed to our content, and they still have a missed idea. Well, I ate too much fat, or has a lot of calories, and it's just this idea that, you know, all calories aren't equal. And if you're having really good calories from high fats that are good for you, it's so great for brain function, metabolic function. And I just think that we're still at the tip of the iceberg of how important that story is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because first of all, what I see in my practice is more and more folks are actually having problems with metabolizing carbohydrates and getting pre-diabetic and becoming diabetic and obesity. So, Gunnar, you are 100% correct. But I think it's a very hard brainwashing to break. I mean, most of us have this idea that if you eat a lot of fat, it's going to clog your arteries. It was so hard for me to break that idea that fat, every time I had fat, my arteries were getting clogged up. I mean, when you go out and you hear people ordering egg white omelets, why don't you want the yolks? Well, it's bad for my cholesterol. So we know it doesn't affect your cholesterol, but so we can go on and on. And so I have a line that I use in the office. You know, do you think fat makes you fat? Or do greens make you turn green? The same way, fat doesn't make you fat.
Right.
So, I think the fat story is very interesting. And I think it's getting through, but we in LA and New York, so it's easier here. It's starting to penetrate here. But even in my generation, people have a very hard time accepting that good fats are not bad for you, and not differentiating between good and bad fats.
And the thing about that I think is so, you know, we look at the way that our brain, we've literally been colonized by billions of dollars of advertising. I mean, that's literally why these big food companies do the programs that they do, these integrated omnichannel communication programs. And it's really, it's such an, to me, I think this 21st century media economy where there's people like us that can speak directly over the internet to people at scale, we're changing that game. You know, we're able to, at a low cost, put out a great pirate signal that hacks that totally obsolete idea and scale a truly healthy alternative very quickly. And that's exciting beyond the conversation, just what we all do together in terms of leveraging the internet to have direct communications with people at scale and be able to efficiently reach people and present an alternative way to live healthy that's like cost effective. That's super exciting.
Definitely. And I'll pipe in on this topic just as a woman too. I think one issue that people get confused about fat is like beauty and weight, when in fact, as we know, these really healthy fats are incredible for your skin. They're incredible for your metabolism, your hormone balance. So they're actually key beauty foods when you're talking about vanity and that kind of thing as well. I see that we had a question pop up. Someone was really interested in what we were talking about cholesterol. Dr. Frank, I wonder if you'd want to elaborate a little bit on that, about kind of the fear people have around eating fats and cholesterol. And maybe we could touch on quickly too, the kind of good fats and bad fats. I think, you know, sometimes we hear, hey, fats are back on the table. These are a great option for you. But there are some fats out there that are processed or damaged in some of the processing that aren't great for people. Maybe we could provide a little clarity.
Okay, so I'll start on the cholesterol, and Gunnar, then you'll take over on the fats. How's that? Got to give you a chance to talk, right?
Absolutely.
So the whole idea of cholesterol is interesting. Whether a high cholesterol is bad for you or not is questionable. The markers that we have today that most doctors check, just the LDL, the HDL, total cholesterol, are actually meaningless. So you've got to go further, even if you take that into account. But the idea that when you eat fat, you're going to have a high cholesterol is a myth. What actually causes high bad cholesterol is sugar. So when you eat a lot of sugar and carbs in particular, carbs and sugar in particular, that's what shifts your metabolism to making more cholesterol, because cholesterol is actually made in your liver. You don't get that much cholesterol from the cholesterol and fat you eat. It's really from the sugar, which then is going to affect liver metabolism. So, you know, the idea that eating a lot of fat is going to, you know, give you a high cholesterol is a myth. The idea of a high cholesterol, whether it's bad for you or not, you know, bad for you is extremely questionable. I come from the school that having a high cholesterol is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, the studies show that mortality rates are, you know, people tend to live longer with high cholesterol. And then the last thing I want to say, because I can go on for the whole hour about this, is the idea of giving people statins to bring down their cholesterol, I think is, you know, I would not almost call it a crime against humanity. I do think there is a place for statins, but I'd say by far the majority of people probably don't need statins. And I don't think statins are a necessarily good drug overall. I think there's a place for statins, but I think they're overused. So I can go on, but Gunnar, why don't you start talking about good fats and bad fats?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, and we've talked on it extensively, but, you know, you've got great fats like coconut oil and avocado oil that, you know, have a high heat point, you know, that, you know, when you cook with them, you know, they don't become unhealthy. Whereas you've got, you know, vegetable fats, which, you know, are really bad for you when you're cooking with them. And so I think it's just really important to know the types of fats you're eating, and, you know, the vegetable fats are cheap, and, you know, the high quality, healthy saturated fats like coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, these, you know, they're a little more expensive, but at the end of the day, it's like that thing, you know, you're going to spend a little more money up front to have some healthy fats that are actually good for you, or are you going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, 30 years from now dealing with medical costs? So it's the investment from my perspective.
And I want to take it one step further. You talked about the vegetable fat. The vegetable oils that we cook with, first of all, there's no vegetables in there. They're actually industrial seed oils. There's nothing, I don't know why they're called vegetable
solvents and all sorts of junk.
Exactly. So what they put in there, and when you heat them, they're extremely unhealthy. And in fact, we talk about sugar being a problem. I'm from the school of thought that think that the common use of these vegetable oils has been a huge problem with the health of our society. So switching from the, you know, the lard and the butter and the coconut oil and the palm oil and cooking with saturated fat. You know, we used to freak out when no one uses lard to cook with anymore. But, you know, that switch from those saturated fats to these vegetable oils has been a huge problem and creating a lot of health problems in society.
Right. You know, this is something that we've written about extensively. I bet on both of your blogs you have information about this too. So our team will throw out some of our in-depth articles on this onto Facebook today. We can all kind of put out a couple of things on there about oil quality. As both of you have remarked about, it's about kind of matching different oils for different purposes, you know, oils to cook with, oils that are raw, what have you. On this note, and getting back to kind of staples, what are both of you, like what are about like 5, 7 things you wish you could just stock in everyone in the nation's pantry? What would those things be? You know, we've both mentioned coconut oil. It's so ubiquitous for all of us wellness nerds these days. But what are a couple other things that you wish you could just keep everyone stocked up on?
You take it first this time, Frank.
I would say sea salt, extra virgin olive oil, but you've got to know that it's proper olive oil, assorted raw nuts and seeds, assorted dried herbs, maybe apple cider vinegar, raw cacao powder, and I think some people don't tolerate beans well, but I think canned beans in a BPA-free can, I think, is also just a good staple. I mean, those would be some of my staples.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have to agree with those. I think that those are literally the ones that I would do. I also use this really bioabsorbable vitamin C regularly, which I love. I love temperature stable probiotics because I can travel with them anywhere. So we sell a great brand on our site. I think that those basic essentials, like the olive oil. We literally went to a 3rd generation Greek farm in Greece, and we source our olive oil right from the farm. The oldest olive tree in the world is just like a mile down the road. So I think the things that you hit on are absolutely spot on.
It's great to note how affordable actually almost all those staples are. I think most people consider supplements like probiotics or vitamin C kind of extra expenses for their family or their roommate. But a lot of those are so affordable. I mean, we're talking about canned beans, coconut oil. These are so accessible. And I think those are some really important points since so many people feel that eating healthfully has to be something that is an expense. It can be so affordable and simple. This isn't a great segue, but I'm still thinking about what we were talking about earlier, both of you, about why we eat, the roots of emotional eating, and that whole cycle of how emotional eating, masks some of the issues we need to address, and then also how emotional eating can actually fuel health problems because we're, messing with our hormones and that kind of thing. Let's get into that a little bit. Do either of you kind of want to?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one, and Frank can fill it out. From very personal experience, I was overweight as a teenager, and it was depression. I was dealing with a lot of internal stuff, and I think as a society, you've got these two factors that are very correlated. One is the way that we've been conditioned to eat by the food system, and another is people feel isolated and depressed, and food is a go-to for that. And so I think it's, this whole question of habit formation and how do we, really empower ourselves to have an honest dialogue with ourselves about why we're eating when we're eating, and the moment we get stressed out, why am I putting something into my mouth, and what's actually behind that activity. And I think I have a lot of compassion for people that deal with that, because I know how real that is for myself, having had to really work. And I know I've been helping my father through like a medical thing in the hospital over the last couple of weeks, and like when I'm there at the hospital, sometimes I notice myself like reflexively putting something into my mouth. And so it's a very deep issue. And so I think we have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves as we move through it. And we need to have a really honest conversation with why we're doing things and build more self-awareness around it.
Right. I think Gunnar hit it on the head. Why we eat is often not because we're hungry. The cue that we perceive as hunger is often not the need for food. It's a need to fill some other emotional issue that's going on. So it's always interesting to try get people to, instead of when they have a food craving, go for a walk, do some breathing. And sometimes the reward they get from that is the same as eating. So there are lots of things you can do, but I think, as Gunnar said, changing habits is really important. I mean, a lot of times we're eating out of habit, could be triggered by depression. Depression could be that cue to eat. But often what I see in my practice is depression and anxiety actually comes from the gut. when your microbiome is out of balance. And it's often out of balance because of all the bad food, the GMOs we eat, and all the stuff. The often start in the gut. You get depressed. I'm getting a lot of echo here. I don't know from what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's some kind of feedback going on. I don't know if that's happening systemically. I'm not hearing it when we're talking.
Yeah. Anyway, it often starts in the gut too, and you get depressed and anxious, and then you eat. So it's a vicious cycle. So it's a complicated issue. Right. But as Gunnar said, the more aware you become, the more you can change it. So
I think it's a lot. Like it really is. We have to be very genuine about approaching it, and we have to cut ourselves a lot of slack. It's a real process. It takes time. Yeah. We have to, there's deep emotional issues that are tied to these patterns.
Yep.
Maybe there was trauma as a child, or there was some unresolved issue that's resurfacing over and over and strengthens itself as a negative habit. And if we want to realize our full potential as human beings, like we just have to do that work anyway. And it can't be just a purely mechanical thing of like good food in, feel good. Like there's a very complex, multidimensional emotional process that we have to honestly confront ourselves with if we're actually going to really have that full potential.
100%. I think it's really exciting the way that people, we're seeing our reader really open up to that. We're branching out from talking about food so much and talking about breath work and talking about mind, body, even the in-between topics like hormone health and habits. I mean, it's all kind of starting to run together, which is really exciting. I think a shift is happening where people are starting to see wellness beyond just what's on their plate or, how many minutes they're tracking on their run. So I just think it's a really important issue. I know it's close to all of our hearts. Hopping back into the topic of food and stuff a little bit, let's talk about gut health. I know it's a very exciting topic for all of us. It's trending, but it's very interesting to talk about because I think what's exciting about it is it creates a lot of solutions for people, things that might be like mystery issues for people in their health, and also mood-related issues, and just a low sense of well-being. I think those things are very related to gut health. Do you guys want to talk about some kind of keys, maybe some places to start for people and getting kind of a hold of that area of their health?
You should take this one.
On this one. How's it? So to me, when I work with patients, I'm working on the gut first often, because the gut is the center. In Chinese medicine, it's the earth element. When the gut's off, everything else goes off. So we're often working on the gut. And even in Western medicine now, we know how important the microbiome is to our health and how important the lining of the gut is to our health. So first of all, there are a couple of issues, just to summarize. The gut is also called the second brain. All your neurotransmitters that are made in your brain are made in your gut. In fact, 70% of your serotonin, which is your happy chemical, is made in your gut. So what's going on in your gut is going to affect your mood. If you're anxious, you're depressed, your focus. That's the first thing. Second thing is 70% of your immune system is in your gut or surrounds your gut. So when how your gut is, the balance of your good and your bad bacteria, the lining of your gut is going to affect your immune system. So what's happening in your gut is going to affect your whole body. I think balancing the microbiome and helping healing the gut and the leaky gut is probably the most important thing, I would say, or one of the most important things you can do for your health. And it's actually not that difficult. It starts with removing certain foods, the sugars and gluten, and for some people, actually a lot of the grains. For some people, it's also soy and corn, removing those from your diet, eating good, healthy food, avoiding the GMOs, avoiding the crap that we're talking about, and then adding, Gunnar talked about probiotics, adding bone broth. I'm obsessed with bone broth, things like that to your diet. So there are a lot of things you can do for a healthy gut. And then again, the emotional aspect, I think, You know, when we're so stressed out and then all these other things going on, it's going to affect gut health too. So to me, those are your basics. And with patients, I'd say 70 to 80% of the time, I'm working on the gut first.
I mean, I totally agree with everything you said there. And I think the bone broth is really cool because it's, you know, so nutrient dense, you know, manages inflammation, really creates a great environment for you know, healthy gut function. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're aware of, but I still think is still at the tip of the conversation, is just how insidious the conventional dairy and meat industry is. And just the massive overproliferation of antibiotics used in that system. And, you know, that just comes downstream. If you're eating that kind of food, you know, you're just, everything is in a very unhealthy, toxic supply chain. And that's also emblematic on the medical system. The moment there's a problem, the first reaction is to take antibiotics or to rub your hand with antibiotic cream or whatever it is. And I think, you know, I think that's a real shame. And I think, you know, one of the little hacks that I've developed, you know, as an entrepreneur, working hard, sometimes not sleeping very well, traveling a lot, is, you know, the moment I feel a little bit of a cold coming on, I just take massive amounts of probiotics. Like every hour I'll take, you know, for like 5 or 10 times a day, for a day or two. The moment I feel a little cold coming on, I'll take temperature stable probiotics. That's why I carry them with me. And it just, without exception, it just completely protects me from getting the cold. And, you know, as Frank mentioned, it's, you know, the gut function is regulated out of the digestive system. And so, you know, the probiotics, you know, really stimulate immune function. And that's a really simple hack that I think is super effective.
I love that hack idea. I'd actually never heard of that before. I pound like ginger shots and all the good stuff, but I love that. It's very interesting, the idea of taking that many probiotics to kind of stave off a sickness.
I don't know what you think of that, Frank. I mean, you might have a totally different view.
I know, I'm curious. I actually
agree. Probiotics and vitamin D. As soon as I feel coming down with anything, or even with our patients, you know, vitamin D and probiotics are two.
And you get it right at the beginning. If you get it the moment you feel a little funky, just start pounding D, vitamin C, and probiotics. It's gone.
I love it. That's a great tip.
I want to go for, I mean, the factory farm animals, and, you know, Gunnar was talking about the sourcing. I think that's a really important point. People don't realize, you know, people think, well, meat is bad for you. I don't know. It's not the meat. It's what's been done to the meat. Often it's not the foods that are the problems, what we're doing to the food. You know, it's like genetically modifying food. It's pumping these animals with all these hormones and antibiotics. That's, you know, it's crazy. And it's going to get worse now with this new administration. Everything, you know, the few little changes that were being made are going to be stopped. So, I mean, I think if you are going to eat meat, you are going to eat eggs, which I'm all for. I think those are superfoods. You just got to watch the source of those proteins, of those foods. I think it's really important. Support your local farmer. Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and that's an issue of quality and quantity. You know, you eat high quality meat and dairy products from a local farmer that's a good source, and you eat a moderated amount of them. It's, you know, that's fine. Now, obviously, look, I totally understand the ethical side of animal treatment, and I think what we do with the farm, you know, factory farming of animals, it is absolutely a crime. And I totally respect people that are vegetarians and vegans, just empirically. Like, I think it's a very important stand to make. That said, you know, there's great things happening with grass-fed and pasture-raised, and I think and not only is that dramatically healthier for the animal, healthier for us, there's a whole movement showing that, you know, those types of farming practices build topsoil, sequester carbon, just like we want to maintain a healthy gut in our stomach. By protecting the soil and having animals, you know, moving around in herds like they have naturally over millions of years, it builds topsoil. Studies are showing it's the lowest cost, fastest way to sequester carbon out of the environment is building healthy topsoil. And one of the fastest ways to do that is regenerative farming practices that use animals in these grass-fed environments that build topsoil.
I
Couldn't
agree.
agree more. Thank you. Yes, thanks. Love that.
I love your note, Gunnar, about how sustainable it can be, that, eating healthfully, how it's this full circle picture. For those of you who are really interested in this topic, I love a book. It's an oldie but a goodie called Real Food by Nina Plank. And to me, it's a good guide that shows, if you're going to eat meat, here's the best way. If you're going to eat, butter, make it grass-fed. Dairy, make it raw. It's controversial as raw dairy can be, but I think that those are great points, that it's not eating these things unless that's a no-go for you, but it's where they're being sourced from, and the huge nutritional difference in the way that they're being produced. On that note, I want to talk too a little bit more about what not to eat. I love that in wellness these days, that's not the focus. What we're focusing on is how can we fill our kitchens, our lives with all these nutrient-dense, nutrient-rich foods. It's not about deprivation. But on the flip, there are some definite things, I'm guessing, on both of your lists that are on your never list, if you will. One thing we love about our friends in Natural Beauty is they all have these great lists, the never list, things that should never be read on a label, that kind of thing. Do both of you have anything on your kind of food never list, ingredient never list? The top of mine would be high fructose corn syrup, for example. Any tips there? Kind of grocery shopping, I guess, label reading tips along those lines.
Greg, take it away.
Well, I'm obsessed with sugar and trying to keep sugar as low as possible. Once you get rid of sugar and high fructose corn syrup and refined carbs and processed foods, there's this whole, I personally, because I became pre-diabetic by eating what I thought was a healthy vegetarian diet many years ago, lots of whole grains, lots of fruits. I actually became pre-diabetic. So I personally changed my diet to, more of a paleo diet. So I don't really eat many grains. Now, I'm not saying grains are bad for everyone, but I think you need to know your metabolism and see what's going on. So there's, I tend to tell people to eat foods that tend to not have a label. So most foods that you should be eating don't have a label, the vegetables, the fruits, the meat, the chicken. But if you are going to buy processed foods, as few ingredients as possible. The shorter the label, the better. The catch line we always use is if your grandma can't read it or pronounce it, don't use it. So, you've got to be realistic too. So, most of your food should not have a label, but when you eat foods that have a label, just, as few ingredients as possible.
I think you hit on a really good point there. The sugar piece is the tip of the spear, but a lot of people still don't realize that the carbs actually are just as insidious when the body metabolizes it in terms of its negative effect on sugar and pre-diabetic predisposition. So that's whether it's white flour, whether it's, all the complex carbs, I think, look, we all have cheat moments. Like, it's not about being like a Puritan about this. I think it's really like being real with ourselves. You're out there, it's like, look, a piece of toast with a lot of butter on it. I mean, it tastes good, let's face it, and there's moments when that's, it's not about, from my perspective, it's not about like a die-hard position, unless you have like a medical condition that like absolutely requires a die-hard position. So I think it's really, again, just, it's about balance. But I think as a species, one of the great challenges that we face is one of self-restraint. We're incredibly powerful. We have so many choices in a 21st century economy, and we have to actually learn how to restrain ourselves. If we're just constantly putting whatever we're told to put into our mouths because it tastes good for a moment but makes us feel sick and diseased later, we're going to continue to head down a life where, vast majorities of our population are sick and diseased. And that's just, as much as we can say, it's, conditioning from advertising, we also have to take responsibility for the fact that, we have a choice. We're very, very powerful human beings. And making that choice is a real powerful way to make a real positive change.
Great points, both of them. or all of them. You've made so many between the two of you. So those, any other tips as far as label reading? I know we're not talking about, I think that's a great tip overall, not eating products that have a label, because I love that. But I'm also trying to give some of those like
more practical. I mean, vegetable oils, we talked about it. Like anything with vegetable oils, like absolutely stay away from. Like that is absolutely the case. Like you see things with like cottonseed and corn oil, like that is toxic junk. You know, might as well burn it. Don't even give it away because it's not worth giving away to anybody. You know, like that is nasty stuff. You know, I think, you know, it's not only food though, it's like cleaning products, you know, things that, you know, were sold that, you know, smell good, but they have hormone and endocrine disruptors in them. Like nothing with scents, and unless it's like essential oils, you know, that stuff is toxic. It's being shown that it affects brain function and development. The skin is the largest organ in the body. You go take a shower, you put your baby in a bath, you let them walk around on the floor afterwards. There's toxic cleaning products on the floor, absorbs right into, you know, these, you know, into your skin that's been dilated by a shower or a bath. So I think, you know, it's not only the food, but it's the cleaning products, it's personal care products. Simpler the better. Whole food based, non-toxic. I love the environmental working group database because, you know, any of like the personal care products, the cleaning products, you can just look it up and they'll tell you what the score is. And, you know, you really shouldn't be using anything that has a C rating or less. And that's like a basic way of thinking about and empowering consumer choices.
Yeah, so really quick on that, that's the Environmental Working Group. Great mention, the EWG.org. They have a skin deep database that will help you look at your house care and like beauty products. And I think they have a wide variety of databases at this point too that talk about food and packaged products. That is a great resource for anyone trying to kind of, you know, demystify the shopping experience. So great mention. Frank, do you want to weigh in on this again about label reading, or I mean, you covered
more to Gunnar's point. I think we need to understand that it's all these chemicals together. It's what you eat, in the water we're drinking, what we put on our skin, what we're breathing. We're exposed to so many toxins on a daily basis, and you know, probably our bodies can deal with 20, 100, or whatever. But you know, there's so many of them. And, you know, we have to, you know, our bodies aren't really built to cope with the amount of toxicity that we're exposed to. So the more you can cut back on chemicals in your food, in your water, on your skin, the better it is for you.
You know, a classic example that, you know, people don't think about new cars. New cars are absolutely like toxic, and they're toxic for like 2 years. And you know, the other day I was like, I know this, and I went to like, cause my lease is up, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a new car. I sat in this new car and I had a headache after 15 minutes. They're so toxic, you know, all of these compounds that they're using in that, you know, new car smell, you know, that's that is absolutely, like at this point, I feel like I'm not going to buy a new car until they start making new cars in a non-toxic fashion. Cause it's crazy. You're breathing all that stuff in your lungs, and you're absorbing hundreds of compounds over, and we spend a lot of time in cars. I mean, that's it seems like a really silly thing. You buy a new car and think about the, you know, dozens of hours a week that we spend in a car driving to work, to our friends, or whatever. That's actually a real practical source of chemicals that, you know, you don't need that. We don't need a new car. Get a used car. It's fine.
Move to New York. You don't need a car.
There you go.
Ride a bike. Yeah, that's a tough one to kind of solve for. And as we talk about this, I think it is easy for all of us to get really overwhelmed. You know, it's a lot of personal research that some of this stuff requires, and it can feel so overwhelming that you figure, why bother, or you know, ignorance is bliss. But I encourage everyone just to kind of find one thing to focus on, whether it's your groceries, your cleaning products, or whether it's even a few go-to meals. If it's just your condiments, whatever it might be, start somewhere. And, you know, by the time a couple of years roll around, hopefully you've spent enough weeks or months investing in different areas, you've really reduced your toxic load, and all that good work adds up. Speaking of condiments, I think condiments are actually a really interesting area when it comes to pantry staples and that kind of thing. You know, there's this whole world of condiments when we're talking about really healthy food, talking about probiotic foods that can be really useful, I think, to people in making whole foods, these unlabeled foods, kind of buying raw ingredients and really making meals for themselves that taste incredible and that are very healthful. Also avoiding things that are toxic, some really highly processed, somewhat dangerous condiments out there. Do you guys want to talk about some of your favorites or some of your go-tos?
Yeah, I mean, I can start on that one. Again, I love Mark Sisson's avocado mayo. We sell it. It's Primal Kitchen. It's amazing. It's an avocado-based mayonnaise. And mayonnaise is great. You can just use it with anything, but you know, most mayonnaises conventionally have vegetable oils or, you know, glyphosate from the way that the oils were produced, or there's soybean oils. And so I think, you know, that's a really good one. I love lemons, so I just have lots of lemons all the time. It's super easy. You know, it's alkalinizing. I love pumpkin seeds. I love nutritional yeast. We sell it as well. You know, it's a nice way to like replace cheese and still get that kind of cheesy thing. And sprouted seeds are great. You know, you get protein. They're very, you know, absorbable. So those are a few things that I think about.
Okay, so I'm not the cook. My wife cooks a lot, but when I think of what she uses turmeric a lot, kelp a lot. She's getting more into probiotic foods. You know, sour things that I thought I couldn't eat, I'm starting to enjoy more. Kimchi, sauerkraut. But she uses a lot of cilantro, garlic. And I said, yeah, so, and I do love the paleo mayo. I think that's fantastic. That is a great condiment.
That's great. That's a great list. That's very shoppable. Gunnar, why don't you start us off on this one? Let's talk a little bit about bargain tips. So we talked about how, you know, some of the staples both of you mentioned are quite affordable, canned beans, that kind of thing. But obviously, Thrive Market's changing the game on that, about what people are able to afford and what they have access to. I don't know if you want to start off with a couple, like, kind of bargain shopping tips, basically, for health food.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the beautiful thing is when you buy food that is less complex and less processed, it's actually less expensive. And if you're buying from a farmer's market, you're on you know, have a lot of vegetables in your diet, you're going to save a lot of money. You're going to feel better. And then obviously on the shelf stable side, you know, the mission of Thrive Market, as I mentioned at the top of the call, you know, something very important to me. I grew up really poor with a single mom. I saw how hard she worked to make healthy choices. And so for me, it's always been crazy that, you know, healthier foods weren't more affordable. And so that's, you know, that's the mission of our business, is really democratize access to healthy living. And, you know, so, you know, I feel like a really elegant solution kind of holistically is, you know, shop for truly nutrient dense food from a local source, and then get everything else from us at Thrive Market. And you're saving money, and it's great for the environment.
I agree 100%. I haven't got anything else to add to that.
I love that.
The healthy, stable eggs, to me, eggs, you know, organic pastured eggs from a local farmer, you know, your local greens. So yeah, shopping at a farmer's market and then having Thrive for the other foods, I think is a great tip.
Yeah, fantastic resource. Amazing, guys. Well, I wonder if someone on our teams is watching our time. I want to make sure we don't go beyond, but I could keep quizzing you guys all day. Why don't we talk a little bit about, this might be the last subject we have time for, but let's talk a little bit maybe about resources, you know, obviously Thrive Market, Be Well, but let's talk about maybe things on your reading list. We talked about the EWG as a resource. Are there any kind of great resources you would recommend for our audience to kind of continue learning, educate themselves about some of this stuff, or even to shop at?
Go for a first rank.
Well, I think you've mentioned a lot. I think, you know, Thrive, farmers markets. I think ewg.org is one of my favorite resources.
Yeah.
You know, my website's got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me think. Gunnar, you take over and let me think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think that you hit on a lot of the very practical ones. You know, you've got amazing thought leadership from, you know, people like Frank and Mark Hyman, and, you know, just there's this great community of people out there that are really helping empower millions of people around the world to make simple changes in their lives. And I think it's really, really, I mean, I'm really grateful for the work that you do, Frank. And it's
mutual.
Really just awesome to be able to collaborate together. And then I think, you know, there's look, we're an enormously powerful, capable species. And, you know, when we honestly, you know, look at our fears and our shadows, and we really take an opportunity to like look at ways that we can be more empowered, it's just amazing what we can accomplish in a life. And I think there's great tools, whether it's Byron Katie, The Work, or it's, you know, there's so many different tools that are out there, whether it's meditation or, you know, there's so many ways. There isn't one way, just like with food, there isn't one way to do it. I think it's, you know, just being real with ourselves, being committed, being consistent, being compassionate. And we can really do great things if we really apply ourselves.
Yeah, so great. Such a great message. I think I'm going to wind us down so we don't go over time. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have more information about the giveaway from all of our brands. So stay tuned on that. I'll figure out how our teams are following up along those lines. But, you know, check out Thrive Market. It's an incredible resource. It's thrivemarket.com. An incredible resource for almost all the staples we talked about. Check out Be Well with Dr. Frank Lipman. Like I said, one of the kind of voices in the wellness scene that's just been a consistently useful resource for so many. And then, of course, the chalkboardmag.com. We're always trying to kind of cover this stuff, nerd out on it for you so we can provide you with these kinds of solutions and talk to these kinds of people who are providing such great information for all of us. So guys, I guess we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really fun.
It's great to meet you guys.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye.